Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be in this fine world. Welcome to today's webinar, our insight session, What Claims Look Like When AI Works, brought to you by NayaOne. I'm Scott Sambucci, and with me is Karan Jain. So Karan and I work together at NayaOne. I'm the managing director for our financial institutions in North America, and Karan is our founder and CEO. So today's topics are really around AI and claims. And if you're in the business at all, which is a reason I assume that you're here, we all know that aside from AI and aside from technology in general, there's enormous pressure across the insurance landscape when it comes to claims and the claims value chain. On top of that, now you have these costs, you have insurance premiums, you have your customers or your members telling you that you're not doing a good enough job. And what that means is really a lot of opportunity to use technology and to use new tools like artificial intelligence to improve that customer experience, improve your process, and ultimately improve those loss ratios. So one of the things we hear time and time again is that there's this need to innovate. Everyone says we need to innovate, we need to digitally transform. And the biggest challenge, I think, a lot of this that we have across the claims landscape is when you break down what we call the claims value chain, all of the steps, all of the big stages across a single claim, there's lots of big steps and lots of tasks or jobs that need to be done in each one of these big steps to go from something as simple as, hey, something happened, I had a tree fall on my roof, I had my bicycle stolen, my basement is flooded, all the way to the point where that customer is feeling like they've been listened to and that their claim has been handled correctly. And so as we use this as an introduction to what we're going to talk about today, I'm going to ask Karan to just say a few words because he's been a former insurance executive. He's managed teams, he's managed technology. And the first question I wanted to ask for him is when you look at this kind of complexity, both combining this need to innovate, you've got all this mounting pressure across the claims landscape, and now you've got this value chain of all these jobs to be done. When you were an executive in that world, how did you start to think about approaching technology, whether it's AI or not AI, as a way to start improving that entire system?
Thank you, Scott. Hi, everyone. The world before AI used to be a little bit simpler, or the lack of complexity there, where you basically had, risk and reward. So what was some of the initiatives that were going to grow your top line, and what were some of the initiatives that were basically going to protect the bottom line? So those are some of the things that you'd actually go through from a prioritization. But also what you find is in large insurers, like these are different teams, part of the value chain. And actually the complexity came from trying to prioritize across, even though everyone had their own budget, their technical teams, from an architectural point of view, from a making sure the budget is being used most effectively, i.e. pick up an OCR solution that's going to be actually leveraged across multiple teams. Those were some of the things that actually drove the complexity. Now, if I look at value chain, whether it's claims or it's underwriting or it's just any other value chain within insurance, what we see is AI has added at least 2 to 3 layers of complexity, because before you used to go, okay, is it risk? Is it a reward? Is it, is it a defensive play? But now you're like, okay, if I take this thing on, am I actually able to take it to my customers? Number one. If I take this on, am I actually tripping any regulatory wires? Number three, if I take this on, how long is this product actually going to be best in the market, or is there going to be a better, cheaper product out in the market in 3 months? So those are some of the complexity when we're working with insurers today, we start to face into.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Karan. And a lot of what we're going to talk about through the rest of the time that we have together today is, number one, talk about that complexity. Number two, probably most importantly, is start to share ideas based on our work here at NayaOne with insurance companies across the world on where you can actually get started. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming when you look at this value chain, you look at these jobs to be done, and the question is, well, where do I start? And so that's a big part of what we're going to discuss today. And then the third part that we're going to discuss is almost I almost want to say like a subtopic, but it's actually a topic on its own, is the introduction of agentic solutions on top of what we've now just getting used to as AI solutions over these last couple of years. And so a lot of this conversation that we're having with you today stems from Karan and I working with insurers every day, talking about these individual problems that insurance companies have and how they're using our platform to solve for some of these. And so as Karan and I work together day to day, we have these conversations, and his thought was, well, these are kinds of conversations we should be having with the entire market, not just amongst ourselves and not just with our customers. And that's why we decided to bring this insight session for you to you today. So as we move on, we think about going from the old process to the current process to the new process. And most importantly, we got to think about what does success look like? Because it's one thing to bring in a piece of technology. It's one thing to supposedly automate a process or improve some sort of part of your technology stack. But it's quite another when you've got to know how exactly did this change? What exactly did change in our organization between the old and the new? And we all know the current pain points, things like the rising loss ratios and combined ratios. We know that a lot of the legacy tech that we may forever be stuck with in some ways is sitting below or behind all of the new technology that exists out there that we want to bring in and adopt and implement. We know that there can be sometimes difficulty proving value out of the gate with some of the pilots and some of the proof of concepts and some of the vendor experiments that we're trying to run. And then, as Karan was just mentioning, it's that balance between, look, we got to run fast, we got to make change, we have to improve this experience internally and externally. On the other hand, though, we're working within a regulated industry. We're working within an industry that has rules, regulations, compliance, and other data security and data privacy needs that make sure that if we're going to move forward, we need to do it in a safe and secure way. And so when we think about those pain points and thinking about when we talk about measuring what matters, I think what's really important is to think about, as you're moving through the rest of this year and moving into next year, we have to pay attention to giving ourselves and almost zooming out and saying, well, why is now the right time? So when we talk to a lot of executives, and Karan, I'll flip it to you in just a moment on this, like we know in talking to C-level executives and EVPs, SVPs at different organizations that it's not just themselves at their level pushing hard, it's the board above them saying, look, why are we not adopting AI more quickly? Or number two here, why is now the right time? Well, why does it feel like all of our competitors are speeding up and we're staying in the same spot? How do we know that our teams are getting the right training and are getting introduced to this new technology in a way that doesn't disrupt them from doing business as usual? Because yes, it sounds good to implement this new technology, but at the same time, we have to make sure that those same team members are aligning to those claims that are coming in each and every day. And then also, of course, number four, making sure that we're keeping accountable to that transformation while adhering to the risk profiles. So, Karan, I want to flip it back to you and ask you a little bit more about, when you talk to those executives, the CIOs, the CDOs, et cetera, that are at these different insurance companies, what are some of the sort of the trigger events or some of the rationale beyond what we've already heard of the last 2 years as to why now is the right time to move into a more AI-centric tech approach?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Really interesting question. So you find, obviously, not all organizations or insurers started at the same time, right? So some started earlier, some are just getting started now. So the people who started first are at a point where they rolled out OpenAI or Gemini or Copilot, and two things are happening. They're like, okay, well, it's been a year. Thank you for rolling out Copilot or equivalent, but what's the actual ROI, right? And what's the adoption rate? And what does it mean for the bottom line? So those are some of the questions that start happening. For the folks that started in wave two, should you call it 9 to 18 months after the first wave, are now like, okay, cool, we can turn Copilot on and have a serious desire to catch up to the peers. So I just want to set that as a thematic of what's happening in the market. Now, with that background, what we're starting to see is folks will be like, okay, this is really great that we've rolled out a Copilot or equivalent while everyone's still using GPT on their iPads, literally. But the thing is, it's actually The next stage that I see execs or organizations, let's talk about organizations first, is with the collection of use cases, which is the other myth, right? Like I saw industry go through a bit of a phase where they were, oh, and I've got 100 use cases. The next person walks up like, I've got 150. Next one's like, I've got 500. And it's like, there isn't a competition in terms of who's got the most use cases. Then the industry is now involved into, okay, how much of this have you actually got in production? Okay, right? And what I'm starting to see and where our conversations with execs is, how much did your organization learn? Because AI adoption and agentic AI is actually the biggest change program we'll all go through, at least in my career, even bigger than internet and mobile, because going through these use cases that you're seeing on your screen now, actually, it comes down to how much are you trying? How much are you learning? Because through that process, you actually understand what's going to be good for you. It's not about simple as, like the old days, you buy one piece of technology that 5-year competitors or peers have bought. And it's like, okay, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. Actually, the game is, how many of these have I tried? Because each piece of technology, AI technology, is going to be different for my organization. It depends on my culture, depends on my org, depends on my processes. So long version, but the short answer to your question in terms of where the conversations are with some of the insurance execs is actually, how do we enable test and learn to equip the workforce? Because the workforce is actually got the context and the business in their head to drive AI adoption, for which you need access to technology. And if access to technology is taking 9 to 12 months, there's a serious, but so big change program.
Yeah, and this claims opportunity radar, again, thinking about the theme of what we're talking about here is, what does AI look like if done right? When we work with a lot of the different insurers we work with, this is a way that we help them get kind of their heads around, like, what's the now term, not even the near term, but like, what's the now term stuff that we should be doing beyond just the Copilot implementations? What's the, think about the Horizon 1 kinds of implementations, and then the next layer out of the Horizon 2, and then obviously the third circle is the Horizon 3. So Horizon 1, we typically, when we work with customers, they're thinking about, what else can we get done this year? And what does that near-term roadmap look like? What are the things that need to get implemented by the end of 2026, for example? And most of these Horizon 1 projects are ones that are on a relative scale are easier, so to speak, to implement than others. And we've got a couple of use cases that we're going to show you as examples of ways that you might think about getting started with AI in your organizations. And if you think about these Horizon 1 projects, a lot of times these Horizon 1 projects are not just isolated implementations, they're actually laying the groundwork for the Horizon 2 types of outcomes. So for example, if you think about something like anything in these Horizon 1, you talk about something like digital FNOL, so first notice of loss. That's an example and a use case we'll show you in just a moment. Well, once you implement a solution, an AI type of solution into digital first notice of loss, what that does is actually lay the groundwork for multi-channel intake or predictive triage, because that digital first notice of loss is kind of a first use case, but the learning from those and the data that gets accumulated from implementing that digital FNOL would allow you then to start doing something that's more Horizon 2, such as predictive triage, or start thinking about how else should I be receiving first notice of losses across multiple channels. And then the Horizon 3, of course, are those things that always feel like science projects or might be interesting in the news now, and we're not quite sure if it's going to materialize or not. Like, for example, quantum fraud. We've already talked to FIs globally that are thinking about quantum fraud even before quantum has really become implemented across the board. And then you've got things like blockchain claims, for example, because what happens if we start transacting more on the blockchain and insurance policies are sitting on the blockchain? How are we going to issue claims around those? And as I move into the case studies in just a moment, or a couple of the use cases, another sort of way to think about getting started is those Horizon 1, 2, and 3. If you're going to put together a work plan for yourself, most of the companies we work spend about 90% of their time on that Horizon 1. So it's like, what's the near term? What's the now term? What execution What delivery am I responsible for right now over the next 12 months? Then they're spending about 5 to 7% of their time on the Horizon 2, keeping an eye on the building blocks that they're executing on Horizon 1. That's going to lead them to be able to implement in Horizon 2 in the next 2 to 3 years. And then the Horizon 3, it might be half a day a month. It might be a workshop that they're doing with their teams. It might be cross collaboration with other business units to make sure that there's some kind of tracking and some sort of history and some sort of content or knowledge share that's being logged so that over time we can start to see whether or not we're making progress towards those Horizon 3 outcomes, and also making sure, like, are those Horizon 3 outcomes that we thought Horizon 3 today, are they actually coming to pass or not? So Karan, interested if you have any other comments on this piece before we get into a couple of the use cases on how people get started quickly.
Yeah, 100%. So I have three comments, right? So one is that Horizon 3 to Horizon 2 to Horizon 1, actually that shift is happening much faster than it used to previously, right? So wanting to do virtual inspections and actually taking them out to even next level are happening now with 3D radars and everything, right? Number one. Number two, there's a lot more cross-functional collaboration between teams when trying to deliver any one of these outcomes, right? Because the industry has learned that working in isolations, we always knew working in isolations never good, but actually people are starting to act on it, and that's actually accelerating their delivery. And number three point I want to make is, like, while these use cases for Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3 there's also still a serious amount of backlog of things like straight through processing, just basic OCRs, just data. That is still a huge backlog of work that then enables achieving these use cases at speed.
Yeah, and just to augment what you were talking about with the cross collaboration, we're seeing most large insurance companies, or most companies in general, they're looking at data. I mean, data has always been a topic. Data has always been a conversation. Any large organization, there could be dozens or even hundreds of different data models, and data systems, and databases, et cetera. And most large companies have a very specific initiative to try to pool that data to make it available across, not just have my claims data and I have my underwriting data separate. We know now we've always known it's important, but when you start layering in the use of AI, Gen AI, agentic solutions, it becomes even more important for the data to be centralized. And it also is important for those different systems that are using those different data models to be cross-collaborative, which is a big use case for agentic, which we'll get into in a couple of moments. So we've got 4 different use cases that we want to introduce, and some of these may be familiar to you already. These might be ones you're like, oh, I already thought about this. I already knew that's something we should be working on, but others might be like completely new, like, oh, I didn't think about that before. So you think about, like, how do we get started? How do we make this easy? What does claims look like if we're using AI effectively? One of the easiest projects that we're seeing across the board is something I mentioned a moment ago, which is the first notice of loss process. So most major insurance companies that we've talked to, they will sheepishly admit that a lot of that process is still very manual. It's email boxes, even multiple email boxes and inboxes every single day. They're filling up with thousands of these claims requests that are coming in, either directly from their customers or from their brokers and from their field agents. And those email boxes are being literally, like, opened by individual human beings that have to read those emails and then prioritize those and figure out what is the best next step. So one of the easiest sort of ways to think about how you can start to transform FNOL is a couple of different ways. So one is just triaging that message that's coming in using an automated tool, but also in this particular case, if you read down the bottom, launching a conversational AI chatbot that enables 24/7 claims intake. So it's the idea of, hey, let's get a chatbot that's starting to accept baseline amounts of information and just train the model, and with limitations about what they can and can't do, but at least just recognizing to the consumer, like, yes, I've received your claim. Yes, we're working on it. Here are some other tips and other ways you might think about what the next steps that might be or asked of you to help us with that claim. So, Karan, in this case, I know this is a tier one UK insurer, so I'm curious about your thoughts and perspectives on this particular use case, and what was easy about this, so to speak, and what were maybe one or two obstacles that needed to be overcome by the company that was implementing this.
So on the whole, the use case is pretty simple, right? And delivering it would unlock a whole lot of ROI for the organization. However, the hardest part here was actually changing the mindset and getting different technologies in to try. So because there's multiple teams involved here, one part of the value chain is like, okay, well, I like this vendor. The second one was like, oh, no, I like this vendor. I've been talking to them for 12 months to solve this problem. Third one, okay, I've got this. Fourth one, I actually want to build my own thing. So actually what we're able to do. So again, I said the use case was pretty simple, but actually culturally, different teams, different agendas, different perspective. What we were able to do was actually bring all four teams together and actually bring all four different solutions into the platform and actually run a challenge against them and let the vendors, and one of them was internal team, build the product, build a solution that could solve this problem, which at the end of the day got them to an outcome of, a hybrid approach. We'll pick this vendor and we'll build the rest in the space of 6 weeks, which otherwise they've been actually talking about this for about a year.
That's an important component as well, because what you just described, just to highlight this, is what is oftentimes, and anybody that's on this call, if you've been at a large insurance company or any large company, there's always this, do we buy or do we build? And candidly, the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, because even a solution that you might choose to technically buy, whether it's Guidewire or Salesforce or a chat solution, it's never going to be completely out of the box. That's why Salesforce allows you to customize and configure their APIs to your business. Guidewire does the same. Duck Creek does the same. And so Karan's point here, which I think is really important to highlight, is that you had two teams internally thinking about that traditional mindset of one team or multiple teams saying, well, I want to buy this, and I want to buy this, and I want to buy this, and the other team saying, no, 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 I could build it. Whereas the truth is in the middle. The result is in the middle. And so providing the ability to experiment and learn, the learning piece of this is like, yes, we should build, and yes, we should buy. We should just build on top of the thing that's already available in the market, so we're not starting from scratch on the build side of things, because we're an insurance company, not a chatbot type of company. So let's move over to the next use case, also related to FNOL. So I mentioned there's kind of two here. One is the triaging of those emails coming in, and that's this. This is another one that we find is actually a pretty easy place to start, because there's a lot of off-the-shelf types of solutions that can quickly be spun up and then customized to meet your individual needs. And so the basic notion is going back to the idea that you've got these emails coming in every single day, and there's platforms that now, and AI tools that can read those emails, use OCR capabilities, and then intelligently route those to different customer service agents or different case managers, depending on the priority or based on the specialization or based on geography, right? So in working with some large insurance companies, when I worked with a firm that was mostly Florida based, and as I got working with the insurance executive around the case managers that were all dealing with different hurricane or flood or other weather related types of claims that were coming in, one of the things that I learned is that they had specialists that they knew, even though they weren't designated as like, oh, you are the flood specialist here as a case manager. They learned over time that certain case managers were better at certain cases than others. And so what they naturally would do as a manager is say, well, these kinds of claims we're going to send to this case manager. These other claims we're going to send to the newbies, because they don't yet know exactly how to handle these more complex flood or hurricane related types of claims that are coming in. And so very simply building that algorithm into a tool that could just read those emails and say, well, based on this information, this is flood based. just happened in a zone where there was a hurricane. Therefore, I'm going to route it to one of these 5 case managers that have been pre-designated as kind of the flood specialist. Something as simple as that, instead of waiting until somebody logs in the following morning to get to the inbox and sort through 1,000 emails that might be in the inbox and then try to figure out which ones are flood related and make sure that that person is sending it to the right case manager. All of that human element, it's important to have, but you can replicate some of that human element by automating it, therefore allowing those customers to get the care that they need immediately because they're higher priority, but then also making sure that those use cases that maybe the AI tool wasn't quite sure about, you can put those into a separate box and say, okay, 80% of these have been automatically triaged and we have high confidence they've been triaged to the right priority level. We still have 20% of these we're not sure about. Those are the ones that should get looked at by a human. Or maybe there's multiple types of claims inside of that one email and you're not sure if it's flood or property or something else. So let's make sure that a human does look at that, but spends more time to make sure they're understanding that first notice of loss or that claim that's coming in. So again, so that customer gets better care, the care that they need, and the routing that it needs. So in a sense, AI is actually enabling the humans to do better work by taking away some of the manual manual work that otherwise should be and could be very easily handled by the air quote robot. Any additional comments on that one, Karan?
No, not in this one. Waiting for the next one.
Yeah. This one you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to take this one? Since you were anticipating the next one here?
No,
Or do you want me to take it?
you go for it.
Okay. So, and by the way, along the way, if you all have questions or comments or thoughts, feel free to just pop those into the chat. Jana's with us today, who runs our marketing operations. She can certainly make sure we're getting to those. So again, we're talking about claims, we're talking about AI, and here in this case, the claims operations and the claims innovation lab was trying to figure out, like, post FNOL, and now we're getting into the claim itself. We're trying to figure out, like, what's going on with this particular claim. So we oftentimes, of course, we're going to have images, we're going to have reports, we're going to have other information that's getting pulled in to that claims file. And so now the question is, well, we've got all these different types of data in different formats, whether that's structured data that comes out of a database or unstructured data that's coming from a document or even a photograph. And so again, the challenge becomes, I can create a stacked file and open that file, and I can look at images and try to corroborate that with a spreadsheet that was sent to me and try to corroborate that with the claims adjuster report that I'm trying to read. And a human trying to figure out, like, what does all this information mean? How is this related to this, and what is the right next best step or the right best next best action? And so in this particular case, as you can see on the approach, this is one of those examples that Karan was mentioning earlier, where there's kind of a backlog of OCR solutions that can use AI logic that can read multiple document types, as including images, and then start to create data as a way to make better decisions about what should happen or what additional questions should be investigated around that claim. Maybe the photos were incomplete, or maybe some of the photos were, one photo showed the same image, but one image had showed worse damage than the other. Well, then maybe it cues, oh, is this potentially fraudulent? How do we know if it's the same house and the same garage and the same tree that supposedly fell on it? Why does the roof damage show one thing on one picture and another thing on another picture? And oh, by the way, here's the claims adjuster report. And oh, by the way, here's the way it was reported by the customer. So being able to investigate these claims to make sure that they're actually true, especially in a case where you might have high volume around something like a natural disaster, all of a sudden you can turn the robots on, you turn the AI on to help you filter through all of this disaggregated information in a way that allows those claims adjusters or those case managers to make better decisions with more corroborated data points. Anything else on that one, Karan? That I might
Yeah,
have missed?
like several points. I think and you already touched on some of them. So I think one is for the insurer to validate how AI could help. there was some very deep thought process in terms of what synthetic data needed to look like and how much of some of the anonymized data they could bring in to actually leverage these technologies. And then there's the accuracy, there's the compute that was kind of looked at. But the interesting one was testing, like, to get to this particular outcome, the level of thought process that went ahead of it was, I'd say, probably greater than some of the other proof of values that we've run with insurers in this space. And I think that actually helped them get to a much better outcome, right? And then are able to leverage the learnings that they created and the assets they created upfront. Because the second phase of this is, while they were using AI for claims investigation, the claim fraudsters were also using AI to build out photos that reflect that they were basically deepfakes. And because of the thought process they had put in front, actually helped them resolve that second hurdle much faster. So I guess the main point from this particular use case that I'd like you to take away is, as we go through these proof of values and these use cases to solve for, the reusability of assets that get created as part of this really do add leverage, speed, and time to market. And this particular use case, Scott, I thought this insurer did a particularly good job at it.
Yeah, I'd like you to say a little bit more about the value of the proof of concept and the work that went in prior to actually hitting the play button on the POC, because you talk about, in the case, we talk about synthetic documents, because in these proof of concepts, we need to create data that looks and feels and acts like the actual data. Yes, most insurers want to use my actual data as part of a proof of concept, but it takes a long time to get an approval. And a lot of times the amount of data that can be used or be allowed to be used for a proof of concept is actually quite small. And so be curious to hear more about the work that went into, it's almost like the old axiom, measure twice, cut once.
That's right.
And the value of the additional work that happened prior to hitting the play button on the proof of concept here, the proof of value, because I think that's also something that speaks a lot to almost a forcing function that comes with running a proof of concept or running some kind of tech evaluation the right way.
Yeah. So look, one thing is real, that insurers can't share data because of regulation, because of privacy, because of commercial sensitivity, so they need to have a way to have synthetic, anonymized, masked, fake, at various level of qualities, data available to run these tech evaluations or AI evals or proof of values or maybe not pilots. So in this particular case, two areas thought process was deeper. Number one, they actually looked at a lot of variations of what synthetic data or what their claims data could look like. And they actually worked out that 80% of the claim were coming from here, from 80-20, but then also where some of their fraud was coming through, right? And that actually, while the investigation, yes, it's an investigation, they actually went the extra layer down the value chain to actually go, okay, if we're going to create this synthetic data, we might as well spend the time to actually create it so it's multi-purpose and multi-use. And because they had done that extra step, and we're talking matter of days extra, not months and weeks here. It takes 6 months, 3 months to get data outside, if you ever can, right? So we're only talking days here. But what it did was actually gave them a very, very high quality reusable asset, which helps them for all their tech evals as well as AI evaluations.
Yeah, and that goes back to the data piece I was talking about before, where insurance companies, we've long known that we've had these different data silos and different data models. This kind of project helps to scan across multiple business units to say, well, these are all different data that we're getting, because we certainly need documents about the the policy itself, which is coming from underwriting, and we need documents that's coming from the person issuing the claim, and we need documents from the adjuster. So starting to see all of those different sources of data from multiple channels is actually a good instigator to say, well, geez, this actually indicates how hard it is for us to get the data from underwriting. And this is why we should do a better job of integrating these data sets or making them available cross-functionally. And the ultimate conclusion, this is the thing I think is really important when we talk about this internal conversation around AI, and people worry like, are the robots taking over, and is my job going to be safe and secure? It's just like with the first notice of loss, where I was talking about, where yes, some of those first notice of loss could be automatically sent for the next best action. But in this case, you can see the conclusion is that AI handled 80% of the 60% of the validation tasks, which reduced the adjuster workload, but it didn't remove the adjuster from the process, because there's always going to be those specialized cases where you're going to need a human in the loop in order to verify information, go back, do a second round of investigation on a particular claim, whatever that is. Again, it's thinking about this as you're thinking about the rollout and how do we do AI the right way as we're introducing it. I think the right way is to say, like, the human is always going to be in the loop. It's a matter of making sure we're focusing that human on only those things that humans can do, and let the AI or the automated tools do those things that are actually like quite menial in task. And actually, a lot of the times, those menial tasks end up with higher error rates because people focus less, they concentrate less, they feel like it's a less important task, so they don't pay attention as much. You end up with higher error rates on those menial tasks when you would assume that the menial tasks would be the ones that should perform at the lowest error rate. So I think it's just a good example all the way around on two different use cases around F&OL when it comes to using chatbots, using OCR, and then on the claim side of things, being able to identify ways we can create efficiencies, which is ultimately going to speed up the claims, identify fraud, and at the end of the day, provide a better consumer experience for that insurance company. So I want to spend a couple more minutes transitioning into agentic AI and have a little bit of perspective from you, Karan, on what you're seeing we're talking about agentic as a almost, I hate to say a subgroup, because it's exploding so much more quickly than even the original AI wave a couple of years ago. But I do think it warrants its own section of conversation in our talk today in this insight session. And then we'll spend the last couple of minutes sort of showing a few folks how they can get started taking advantage of or implementing some of these projects using NayaOne. And so the backdrop of this, we know, if we think about the three major cloud providers, you've got Google, which I was at their Google Cloud event earlier this year, and they had a huge announcement, a huge splash around their Vertex AI platform that allows and avails companies to their agent space platform and all of the hundreds of agents that are already pre-built and available for deployment, as well as, of course, being able to build your own. And then more recently, over the summer, AWS announced they've got their agent core, and we have a agent space workspace with hundreds of agents that that are already pre-built, and you can build your own. And of course, Azure AI Foundry has been available for some time, and with Microsoft's heavy stake in OpenAI, there's a close collaboration. So they're making it very public and making sure that people know that OpenAI's new model is open and available on their Azure AI Foundry. So if we sort of talk through this, Karan, would love to get a couple minutes of your perspective in terms of how the C-level folks, the CIOs, the CDOs, the CTOs, all the folks that are almost like pushed by the board, like, you got to go fast with AI. They're now looking at agentic as a solution, not as just a point solution for, oh, I can do better with OCR, I can do better with triaging my F&OLs, but more as an enterprise level solution, and what some of the trends are, and how the folks on this call could think about how they might introduce this or make it easier to implement on the claim side of the business.
Yeah, so if you think about it, the journey so far, it's like, okay, we got GPT or we got Copilot, kind of where we started. Okay, we got those things. Then it's like, okay, I've got some native AI companies that I can use that can help me with, reading particular claims, Then it's like the third stage or the third wave, and these are very short periods of waves between these waves. Is like, okay, my existing large vendor is now starting to roll out agents. Okay. Then it's like the next wave, which is like, okay, now I've actually got a low code, no code platform that I can give to business who can then start writing up automations. And I'm going to call them automations because they're not quite agents yet, right? But applying next stage of automations. That hadn't previously happened. All the tools were roughly there anyway. Now, where we see with the agentic AI, this is like, I'm seeing some very excited execs. And actually on this one, you're not getting pushed from the board just yet, but there's actually a very high level of enthusiasm from the C-suite itself, because they're seeing how this is like you got AI point solution or a chatbot running across the organization, but this is actually now, think about processes being able to talk to each other and learn as you go. And getting that right is not going to be an overnight job. So they also understand that. So the smart money is now actually starting to move into deploying early agents in a safe and responsible way space around claim handling, or as you've got for detection. I'll let you talk through these use cases, but actually some of the more painful use cases that are coming through, people are not only just doing standalone use case agent, but actually then starting to integrate those agents. And I'm starting to see that. And there's genuine level of excitement, not theater, actual excitement, actual business value here.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a question here from Chandan about agentic AI and use cases other than chatbots, and that's exactly why we prepared this slide to show some of the other use cases that we're seeing, that we're discussing with other large insurance companies, of where they're looking to deploy agentic solutions. Because any of these, like, solve any one of these 5 use cases alone, and that company is going to be winning and making major leaps across compared to some of their competitors. And so, like, ultimate, go ahead, Karan.
No, I was just saying 100%. And actually getting the first 2 is the hardest thing. But best time to plant the tree was 25 years ago, right?
Yeah, I mean, the middle one here, improve operational efficiency. I mean, that's always sort of like the easy way to talk about AI or agentic solutions or any kind of automated solutions, but it also can be the sort of the easiest starting point, because when you talk about things like routine admin tasks, like verifying policies or compliance reporting, those tend to be back office, right? So you're not in front of the customer itself. There's lots of manual process. There can be high error rates in those internally. And this is a place where those routine administrative tasks are often siloed across different parts of an insurance company. So that's where an agentic solution can kind of sit on top of those different processes across different silos and start to create a workflow and start to create the automations that Karan was talking about in a way that improves operational efficiency. It almost proves out that these agents can work. It gives the team experience with rolling out an agentic type of solution, so that they're more comfortable moving into the higher, like, sort of more direct use cases like fraud detection or real-time data, or even customer service. So any of these in itself, you just pick one and you're able to implement over the next 12 months. I think compared to what we're seeing in the marketplace, you'd certainly be winning the fight or winning the battle across the board. Some of those benefits, of course, I mean, I think they're the ones that you don't need this session for us to tell you, that you're going to have things like reduced costs. Karan mentioned a little bit earlier about increasing the straight-through processing, which is better for customers. You've got decisions made on data as opposed to an individual adjuster or an individual case manager doing what they think is right, but without the oversight of somebody catching a potential error. And then at the end of the day, it comes down to what I talked about before, which is optimizing your resources. How do you make sure that your claims professionals are focused on those highest value tasks or most difficult tasks that the AI can't do or can't do alone, to make sure that those potentially sort of use cases that could end up costing a lot from a lawsuit standpoint or headline risk are getting handled by the people that need to handle it from a human in the loop versus the more rudimentary or sort of business as usual use cases that could be handled by the robots or by the AI. There's another follow-up question, and I think it's a good one for you, Karan, especially since you've sat inside the insurance world before. Can you touch on AI regulations for insurance and any thoughts around monitoring these AI agents? What are some of the folks that we're speaking with every day, or how are they approaching the regulatory piece of this from your point of view?
Yeah, so obviously there's the national insurance community regulators. There's state law in US specifically. In UK, there's AI guidance, and there's EU AI Act that's going into force in the coming months and year. So depending on how wide or where your business is and where your business is applicable, you might get hit with more than one regulation. And that seems to be some of the challenges that our customers are starting to face. But even if you're just getting hit by one, there's also the NIST AI risk management framework that most of the, we see industry starting to adopt, or at least start with the framework to get started with. So that's kind of like from a regulation point where I see in the insurance landscape at the moment. Secondly, and as far as it goes to the AI agents monitoring, not a whole lot of agents are gone to production yet. They're still in that phase where they're actually getting monitored, call it UAT or pre-prod, where it's still a safe, responsible place. So going back to my earlier point, like, this is a whole different landscape. It's not putting in another piece of technology. It's like putting a whole different landscape of technologies that is actually can self-operate. So there's a whole lot of monitoring that's going on before these things go in production. Now, for those monitorings, you've got your standard AI practices that are being deployed, but also you've got the what's the word I'm looking for here? Keeping it away from customer and production as much as possible, as a simple rule, right? For now.
Yeah.
Like in the industry, like just last point on that is like in the industry where I see some people basically like, oh, but yeah, great, you're doing all these POCs and pilots and like, how much is actually made to production? Actually, that's not a bad thing, because the more proof of values and experimentation you're doing, the greater your learning velocity. There is huge amount of increase in there. By rushing it to production, we're also starting to see a whole lot of issues, right? So taking time to learn, getting the first couple right is absolutely worth it.
Yeah, and that's as you were talking, Karan, and that question I think is what prompted me to bring up this slide, because this second section here, risk across data and compliance domains, like regulatory, of course, is one of those areas that needs to have its focus, right? But there's the legal, there's the security, there's the compliance, there's a privacy. That's just one of the obstacles that can kind of stand in the way for an insurance company to be able to take action on this, and as well as small siloed experiments at the bottom of this. The idea that you've got this fragmented and ever-changing vendor landscape. So I was pulling some data this weekend with Karan, and one of the things I investigated was like, how many AI solutions were there 15 years ago? And the answer was like basically zero. You look back about 10 years ago, how many AI solutions or so-called AI solutions are out there? It's like about 1,000, on a relative scale. And if you look today, it's literally like 15, 20,000 enterprise AI solutions that are out there in the marketplace. So that's gone up exponentially. And that doesn't even include the agentic solutions that I just mentioned, where you've got Google's Vertex platform, you've got AWS and their Agent Core, you've got Foundry AI, and all of those have hundreds of agents alone just sitting in there. So you end up with this ever-changing landscape, and then you add to it this complexity around risk and data and regulatory, and then you've got what is typically a long procurement cycle. So it's actually a really good segue as we wrap up here, because a lot of people want to know, like, what is it that NayaOne does to help with introducing AI and experimenting and bringing AI into the organization. And so if you think about going back to the slide with some of the obstacles standing in the way, including these long procurement cycles and the requirement around risk, security, data, compliance, et cetera, you kind of got this, what we call the old way of vetting a new tech vendor. And with the numbers increasing so rapidly of tech vendors, think about any time you want to try to bring even just one tech vendor into your organization. Frequently what that, or almost all the time, that's going to mean you're going to have a very long process because you've got to bring that vendor through risk, security, compliance, infosec, cybersec, legal, et cetera. Everybody's got to check the box on this vendor just so you can run a test or an experiment. And which is, you think about where we were just 1 year ago, or even 6 months ago. If you are just now starting to explore how a tech works that you found a year ago, like think about how far behind that tech is probably going to be, or how far you're going to be relative to the other solutions that might be in market. So the way our platform is designed is that because we sit outside of the walls of our customers, so you think about on the left, you've got an insurance company, a financial institution on the left, and that institution, your insurance company, has its security perimeter with all of the data, all the security, all the architecture. NayaOne sits completely outside of that. So we use the phrase air-gapped and off a state. We're completely separate and disconnected. And that's what allows our customers to be able to take these different AI solutions and be able to test them quickly in a matter of weeks, as opposed to waiting months or even years before they can start to test the technical abilities of some of the vendors that are out there. And so you think about kind of this old way versus new way. It's going from 9-month vendor eval cycles to 4-week proof of concepts. It's going from all of the costly infrastructure to set up an experiment with sandboxes and everything that has to happen internally with your IT team to be able to not have to worry about that and be able to set up a sandbox environment inside of NayaOne. Instead of choosing one vendor to test, now you can run multiple vendors in a side-by-side comparison in ways that Karan mentioned a little bit earlier before. And instead of having to worry about data, security, compliance, and regulatory, now again, because we're completely external, you can resolve for those. And as part of those evaluations, you can install the regulatory compliance and other risk parameters that are going to be important for those vendors to adhere to in order to be successful in your organization. And so, for those of you that are interested in learning more, we have what's called a claims lab. And so this came from us working with customers over time where, you go back to that opportunity radar where there's so much to consume. There's so many different projects you could be running. The question is like, where do I start? What vendors do I look at? How do I set up an experiment the right way? And so we took it upon ourselves to actually build what we call a claims lab, which is essentially a set of pre-built proof of concepts and tech evaluations with recommended KPIs, recommended objectives, recommended vendors, ways that you could get started very quickly introducing these different technology tools into your organization without the heavy lift of having to send every one of those vendors through third-party risk management. Small teams can very quickly do those assessments themselves, do the vetting, and then if that vendor proves itself, then you can bring it more widely across the organization. And that all happens because you're able to do that quickly inside of this claims lab. So again, all of our architecture and security, we're always isolated and we're always completely external. And on top of that, we have, what you would consider all of the gold standard certifications around GDPR, ISO, SOC 2s. And a lot of the technical benefits is really what it comes down to is being able to give business teams and technical teams the ability to move much more quickly when it comes to testing out new technology so that you can stay ahead of the curve instead of being behind it. So if we go back to that value chain we showed before, here's examples of different vendors that have been tested in our platform and are available for assessments, including any others that you might want to bring along. And so I can show you different aspects of this, but for now, we just kind of put a pause to see what other questions folks might have before we wrap up. If you got any other questions, now would be a good time to pop them in the chat. If you're interested in learning more, if you're not already a customer of NayaOne, then very easy to get back in touch. Just respond to any of the emails that you received as part of this webinar. Either me or somebody on my team will get in touch. We can walk you through, talk about your different use cases. We can map your opportunity radar to your business to help you identify which projects might be the easy ones to start with. We can introduce you to the claims lab. So lots of ways we can help you get started to introduce this into your organization if it's not already. And if you are a customer, then there's probably a lot here inside of this claims lab that might not yet be activated at your company that's using NayaOne. So we can help you get even more out of your investment in working with us. So before we wrap up, Karan, I was going to toss it back to you to see if there's any other questions or comments, anything else you wanted to share before we let the folks on the call get back to their day.
No, thank you for leading the session, Scott, and thank you everyone for joining us into this insightful session. The departing thought I would share is number one, AI or AI adoption isn't a fad. It's pretty real. It's happening. Execs are all over it. CEOs have been screaming about it. It's more bottom line saving than it is top line right now, but that will soon change. It's also because the fastest way for the organization to learn is to address back office or efficiency use cases because they're not near the customer, but the industry will move in that direction. And number three, biggest thing I can say is it's not like the old days where you buy one product because it's been in the market for 5 years and your peers are using. Adopting AI is an exercise, and actually going through, learning through different pieces of technology, different use cases is the thing that's going to help you get faster, both as individuals, as teams, as business units, and as an organization. So depending on, where you're joining us from, that's the biggest thing I can get. I just finished the session today with a fairly large insurer. They've put they're in the middle of their AI agentic hyper challenge. 1,000 applications going through that thing, all sorts of use cases. So the market's definitely on the move. It's not, and a whole lot of it's not public yet. So my only point here is AI adoption is about doing, and doing so responsibly.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining today, Karan, and everyone else. Most importantly, thank you for sharing part of your time of your day with us today. Hope you gained something when you go back to your colleagues, go back to your the rest of your day, that there's at least one thing that you took from this that you can share with someone. And if you want to learn more about how we can help you, just let us know. We're here to help. Thanks, Karan. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Scott.
Cheers. Yep. Bye.